Welcome to Cobb, Conversations on the Business of Brands with Sudeep Chawla and Sharvan Raghavan.
Hi Sharan,
Hey, Sudeep.
I recently saw that you interviewed Mr. C.K. Ranganathan,
Right.
and
In
I'm
Tamil.
sure in Tamil,
Yeah.
and I'm sure there were many things that people could learn from that particular interaction.
Right.
Why don't you introduce Mr. C.K. Ranganathan to the uninitiated?
Hmm.
And then I have a question to ask you.
Sure. Mr. C.K. Ranganathan is the founder champion of Kevin Care. And Kevin Care has started, I think, in 91, 92.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of the few brands from the South that is scaled nationally. They're makers of Nile Chick shampoo. They are the first people who made shampoos in a sachet.
Yeah.
And that's his biggest claim to fame. But then they've gone into personal care, foods. They even have bakeries today, and their milkshakes are extremely famous, especially in railway stations across the country.
Hmm.
They call the Coven's milkshake. And so talking to him to understand his journey was amazing.
Yeah. In fact, I remember one of his launches that I was very inspired by. Those the
Hmm.
small perfume bottles, 5 rupee, 10
Right,
rupee ones, the spins one.
right.
So at that time, we used to know, Kevin Care as a company that could miniaturize anything in the world.
Anything, absolutely.
Okay, excellent. So now they started out in South. They were big in South,
Right. They
and
still are.
therefore they still are correct. So my question that originates from there is that too often we observe regional brands face some struggles when they want to expand.
It's awesome that you asked this question because I asked this exact question to Mr. CKR.
Okay, excellent.
And there was a lot to take away from what he said.
Hmm.
And a lot of it is very commonsensical, but
Hmm.
these are things when you're in the moment, right? When you're, for example, when you're batting with in the last over, it's easy to say how Dhoni would have scored, but for you to be there and score it is a completely different thing.
Hmm.
So, so there are about 7 points he mentioned. So I'll just go through
Okay.
exact 7 points that he said
Yeah.
and see if it resonates with our audience. Number one is that everybody starts local. So where you play becomes a very, very critical point of how you get started in your business.
Okay.
And that is the most controllable aspect of your business.
Fair.
To expand on that, it would be to say you don't really control who your competitors are. Yes, you can choose a relatively less competition field, but who your competitors are is not something you can control all the time.
Yeah.
And when you start out, it's important to start in an area of your strength. So, where you play, what is your market, which city, which part of the city are you launching in? All these become very critical decisions. And this then ends up becoming a bit of a problem because you're so comfortable playing in your comfort area, you refuse to leave that space. That
Understood.
becomes a big
Okay.
problem.
Fair. So this is like maybe Nirma starting with Gujarat, winning
Right.
Gujarat, and then expanding across India by taking that winning formula.
That's the perfect example of how not to get stuck where you start.
Okay.
So,
Excellent.
and
Okay. What's next?
the second point is exactly that: dare to explore. Said
Hmm.
once you've launched, there is already something to be lost now. Now that you're in business, you've seen money. In FMCG, unlike the D2C world, you do have profits to make, even at any scale that you operate.
Mm-hmm.
So businesses get worried about losing what they've gained so far. They put in a lot of hard work and they're frightened about leaving that comfort zone, like I mentioned. And this prevents them from expanding swiftly and smartly. And ideally, what they should do is if you start, say, with a street, go to the next street. From the next street, you cover the city. Then you cover multiple cities and your villages and your districts. And you have to have the ambition to keep expanding. The biggest example of somebody who has not done this, I would say, is this brand called Bavonto in Tamil Nadu.
Yeah.
They have a fantastic grape variant of a soft drink, aerated
Hmm.
grape. And it's something that is really, really nice. It sells really well in Tamil Nadu, but it hardly leaves the boundaries of Tamil Nadu.
Hmm. Okay. Okay. Maybe it's a function of their ambition.
Yeah. Possibly. And they actually take the game to the Cokes and the Pepsis of the world. But they are afraid to spread themselves thin by expanding into other markets.
Okay, fair point. What else?
The third point is about the business being people dependent versus system led.
Hmm. Okay.
Most businesses, most entrepreneurs, when they start with family, friends, and acquaintances. Even Mr. CKR started with people, whoever he knew. It's not, he didn't check them for qualifications. He just said, these are people I can trust, I can work with, and he started a business there. Now, what they do is they bring in their personalities to the business, and they bring in a certain sense of ownership, and therefore their relationships start becoming the way to do business in the market. Now, while it's a great way to get started on your business, the problem is that when it's relationship led, you can never transfer the strength of a relationship from one person to another very easily.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea is that when you set up relationship based business, you need to systematize it very, very fast. And you need to become less people dependent and more system oriented, set in your SOPs. So your relationships help you in learning fast, but that should be leveraged in setting up your SOPs.
Okay.
Your personal relationships are not transferable.
Understood. So now, for example, large companies like say Dabur,
Hmm.
yeah, or Pidilite, etc. They
Right.
were all in the journey of getting professionals into leadership positions, etc., etc.
Right.
And we know these companies are huge, big in their size. So
Right.
that begets the question: when is the right time to
Hmm.
move from being highly people dependent to being system led?
Brilliant. Because when you are people dependent, there are certain advantages.
Hmm.
The problem is in scaling. Now, when do you shift from one to the other? Is a good question, but I'll change it a little bit. I think we've discussed this before on the show to say
Hmm.
business is relationship driven. Now, then why are we saying these relationships should be replaced with systems? It's not about people's relationships, individual relationships, but about the business's relationship with its channel partners and customers.
Mm-hmm.
Now, how do you systematize it is the question. Now, when you set up your personal relationships to win in the market, you understand why it is winning. Even though people like you, they will still not do business because if they are at a loss, they are making some money, there is some advantage to them in being in business with you. You've got to replicate it across other markets. When you go from your nascent market to the next is when you should start systematizing these relationships to become transition from personal relationships to brand relationships.
Okay, fair. I think that makes sense. Okay, what's the next one then?
Number 4 is something that's very common even in the corporate world. A lot of managers face this. It is the inability to delegate. If you look at a lot of founders and the founding team, they do it with so much passion and they're learning on the go. And every time they learn, they end up bettering the system to a level that they achieve perfection or a great degree of excellence in what they do.
Hmm.
Now, I meet founders even today who are very, very worried to delegate the work to them, to their reportees or people they hire, because they will not be able to do as good a job if the founders did it themselves. Or I'm sure it'll be the case that you'd face with a lot of managers who you'd work with who
Hmm.
would struggle to delegate, right?
Yeah.
Now, the theory Mr. CKR said was that it's okay if the person is only 80% as good as you, but 80 into 10 is still 800, and your 100 will still remain only 100 when you execute.
Hmm. Hmm.
Getting
Okay.
professionals, giving them a designation, giving them a mandate, and letting them execute it the way they would in the limits that you set for them as the organization is the way to get rid of the mundane and start focusing on what you need to as a leader in the business to expand.
Okay. So basically, evolve your role along with the size of the organization.
Absolutely.
Okay. Understood. What's the next one? Fifth one?
The next one is the fear of the unknown.
Uh-huh.
This goes back to the first one, right? We said we are in the comfort zone and we refuse to go get out of it and explore new markets. Here, it's in a different sphere that India is diverse. We speak different languages. So when you go to the next state and you don't speak the local language, You almost fear what you don't know, and that hampers ambitions for people to expand. That makes it look scarier than it is. And the the other aspect of the fear is that product is something that the founders control. So they end up thinking my product will not work in the other state. This is made for the local tastes, local preferences, and therefore they don't explore, or they over engineer their innovations and try and explore new markets. They do a pilot, it fails, they keep coming back. They very rarely do they expand diligently into other markets, just out of the fear of unknown. Of could be a consumer insight, could be the trade relationships. This fear is what kind of holds them back. And I think this reminds me of an example, Sudeep.
Mm-hmm.
One of the entrepreneurs I was talking to is making dosa chips, as in chips that's like dosa, made of dosa batter.
Interesting.
And
Okay.
and this person is from Gujarat,
Oh, okay.
and he's planning to sell sides of chutneys with it, to sell dosa and chutney as a snack instead of just breakfast. And we are diverse, but we are not that different. We're willing to try a lot of things within the country. And the encouragement here is that if a Gujarati sitting in Rajkot can make dosas and chutneys to sell in non-South Indian markets, I think people have hope of exploring new markets without too much fear.
So therefore, the advice is that if you have an idea, have the belief that it can scale to other geographies, other regions, and take the effort to test it with consumers, and you would possibly find some kind of success there, which will encourage you.
Absolutely. And one point I forgot is that, especially for businesses from Tamil Nadu, the fact that they do not speak Hindi or speak another language outside of Tamil and English becomes a bit of a dampener in the expansion plans. And Mr. CKR said so himself on the show, where he said, because I did not speak his language, I wasn't sure how to employ him or appoint him as a distributor. So I sent a guy from Chennai to manage a distributor in Haryana.
Okay.
And that was a disaster that he had.
Fair. I'm sure he learned, but that did not stop him from experimenting or expanding.
Exactly. This fear holds people back, and the fact that he managed to overcome that fear is why Kevin Care stands where it does today.
Okay, fair. That's the fifth one. What's the sixth one, Sharan?
Number 6 is something we talk about very often on this show. In fact, that's the title of our show.
Okay.
It's about building a brand.
Oh, okay.
Because most regional businesses transact in products and commodities, and they forget to build a brand. They do transactions. And this is the stage we say most regional brands get stuck in this long chew stage, if you remember, of the FMCG life cycle. And they do push sales, they do discounting, they do promotions, but without building a brand, they cannot get out of the long chew. And that holds back expansion. For example, if you say you're starting in Karnataka, you've built a brand that's got pull in other, maybe even the border markets. That's enough incentive for your business to start expanding there automatically. And when you don't build a brand, you're dependent only on their transactions, then it's difficult for you to expand.
Okay, fair. That's fair enough. So if you build a brand, you will be able to expand faster.
Absolutely.
Because you've cracked the method of creating a pull.
Yes, because when there's demand, you will supply, and that will ease the pressure and your fears of supplying to a new area.
Fair. Okay. What's the last one?
The last one is something that I come across with a lot of my clients is succession planning. When a new generation takes over from the older generation. So most of the clients I work with are family businesses in the FMCG domain. And it's usually the second generation taking after the first generation. And in Indian culture, we kind of confuse disagreement with disrespect.
Okay.
So this becomes a bit of an elephant in the room where one generation will not disagree with the other, but will hold all their thoughts, will have a completely different vision for the brand and start biding their time. And this actually augurs pretty bad for business because you are not focusing on what you should be doing right today and where your company should be going tomorrow. And the only way to get around this is to treat it as a business and not as a personal ego thing. Sit down and define your business ambition and where you want to get to. So most often when the new generation comes in, they believe the old generation has been slow. And the old generation thinks we've done so much and the new generation wants to change everything we've built so far. So to align this personal difference becomes extremely critical for these regional brands, because most regional brands that exist today are family businesses in India. And if they can sit together and align, say, this is the direction we want to take the business in, and sign off on it, that augurs well even for the organization, not just for the family.
Okay. So you're saying this also becomes a barrier for them to scale up.
Significant barrier, because the thinking and the execution are not married in this space.
Fair. I think very interesting list, very well-rounded list. Not just about product, not just about the business, shape of the business, but it is also about the founder's mindset, people that he chooses to surround himself or herself with, and the sort of planning that they have done. Excellent. So let me repeat those 7 points. First is where to play, which is about starting local and then expand. Second is dare to explore the hitherto unexplored markets, get into the new markets and dare to explore them. Then finding the right time to become system dependent, system led versus just being people dependent.
Right.
Get rid of this, fear of delegation. Even if you delegate to people who are 70-80% efficient, you're far better delegating to them versus doing everything on your own. Then getting over the fear of unknown. Believe that consumers are more alike than disalike, so therefore
Right.
test your product, test your concept, you will find encouragement. Invest into building a brand. Commodities find it difficult to scale. Brands are easier to scale because you now know how to generate demand. So build a brand. And last is doing a very good succession planning or handover, which is about aligning the new generation and the old generation and avoiding this almost an impasse where you're not really taking long term actions but just biding your time.
Right.
Okay,
Perfectly summed up,
excellent.
Sudeep.
Excellent. This is a great summary, and I'm hoping you have not hidden any gems that CKR shared with you.
This was a 1 minute conversation that's become a full episode here.
Oh, okay.
Or,
Oh, this was one of the questions.
This is just one of the questions in the podcast.
Oh, okay. Excellent. So I think those of you who understand Tamil should go and possibly visit that podcast. And those who don't, we promise you that we will bring you some snippets from that podcast into COB, and try to give you more examples around it, so that you can also learn from what CKR spoke during the podcast that we referred to at the start of this episode. Thank you very much, Sharan.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sudeep.
Thank you for listening to COB, Conversations on the Business of Brands with Sudeep Chawla and Sharavana Raghavan. Subscribe and learn more at cobcast.net. That's COBBCAST.net.